Today I'd like to go over the HomeAgain pet recovery platform that we've put together. And I joined HomeAgain about 10 years ago when we decided to basically relaunch the brand and really focus in on some of the issues that we were having with pet recovery. And I'll kind of go through that today. Though listening to everybody in the last day and even today, picked up on a couple things, one being on the RFID, on the chip. I know Marto kind of went through that. When I get to that section, some areas I just want to emphasize and focus on just to correct a few things. And then the other thing that I want to challenge everybody, because I keep hearing about we need identification and we need a database. I want to challenge folks to really understand what is it the problem that you're trying to solve, because I think every organization fills in the blank once you say database. You know, I want medical records. Well, what kind of records do you want, right? I want information so I can help identify it, right? So what is that? And as I'll share in mine, there's some concerns you need to think about and plan for as well, right? There's some privacy issues that you're going to have to address and determine whether that data is presented or do you need to hold it back. You also get into legal disputes as well. I hate to tell you how many times that I've been brought to court and litigate for different cases on property disputes and things like that where my database has been subpoenaed. So things like that come up. I want to talk about that. Didn't like that. So part of the solution for HomeAgain, there's a need for an identification. There's a need, of course, for the database and the records we want. But there's also how we get that data, what we do with that data, contact centers that we have built around that to kind of support those that are calling in or communicating with us with those requests. But really, the problem statement for us was built around things that we know, right? We know 1 in 3 pets get lost every year, and that loss could be for an hour. It still happens. We get folks who don't even know that their animal is lost when we call them. Tell them we found it, like, had no idea my dog was lost. And that equals to about 8 to 10 million stray pets a year. And without any kind of identification, dogs, about 20% of dogs actually get returned back to their owners, and only 2% of cats. And unfortunately, about 4 million small animals are euthanized annually, right? So that's one of those areas that we're trying to solve, make sure that doesn't happen, that every animal gets their way back home. Top reason pets get lost, and a lot of these are obvious. The visual ID that they have, that slips off, right? So there's no way for anybody to know who that animal belongs to. And I've heard it here as well, right? When you have natural events, wildfires, storms come through, that's a big one where we lose animals. In fact, for us, during the holidays, 4th of July weekend, that's our biggest weekend where that phone rings for lost animals. Those loud noises, the animals, they run. The other thing, and I don't have it on this list, and I've asked my marketing team to put it on this list, is small children. And the reason why I say small children, I'm a father of 3 daughters, and it wasn't until my little one was born that I realized my dogs could leave the house. She decided that when she comes in and out of the house, she doesn't need to close the door. So a lot of times I'd be in the backyard, and here comes my pug, wants to see what's going on. And again, it took my 3rd daughter to realize that would happen as well, right? So children are another way you can lose your pets. So how does this, how does this work? How does this system work, right? The identification, without it, we got 90% of the animals we know they won't get home. Collars fall off. So in these microchips, they help create that bond that you'll have with your pets, right? It increases the chance of those animals being reunited. Supports the human-animal bond, right? You have that connection with your animal. And it also, and again, this presentation is geared more towards our vet clinics to kind of describe what we're going through and what we're selling, but really maintains that vet-patient relationship, right? So they've invested in it. It allows them to make sure that pet stays with that owner, and then there's a lifetime of care that goes with that. If that pet is lost, that's a customer that they lose. And then, of course, it helps reduce the number of strays and intakes into shelters. So that's, of course, a big thing that we're trying to help the shelter organizations with as well. And again, and these stats are somewhat old. I haven't gotten my updates in, and I'll kind of walk through that. First one, our 1 million pets. I've got something to share with you, big news that we have this year. And I'll share a small video clip with you at the end of this presentation to show you where we're at. We have about 15 million registered pets in our database today. They're active with us. And I'll explain later the pet rescuers I have there. We have almost close to 2 million pet rescuers in our organization, and we use those and some of those are members of HomeAgain. Some of them are just regular civilians that have given us their email address, and we communicate to them when we know that we have a lost pet in their area. We'll send them notes. We do close to 20,000 recoveries a month, so we have a very active call center, probably up to about 70 people that are dedicated just to that mission for lost found pets. It's a fairly simple and straightforward process, and I think you've seen it as well from what you face in your space with microchipping horses, right? So your pet is microchipped. The key point here, and you've identified it already, is getting that enrollment, right? A microchip is only as good as the data that's in the database. Without it, it's basically a cell phone where you haven't assigned a carrier to it, right? It's just a bookend. It doesn't do anything. And then once your pet goes missing, you notify, for us it's, you notify HomeAgain, and then we activate our recovery network, and again, that's pet rescuers, that's any vet clinics or shelters who buy from us. We notify them. It goes out on our website. It also goes out on our app as well to kind of just get that message out. There's lost pets. Be aware for it. And then, of course, we've got scanners, and I'll go through some of the technology as well, right, so that the vets and shelters can identify those animals. And, of course, those are universal scanners. So it picks up a lot of the legacy or the backward compatibility on the program. And then, of course, all the new stuff, which is all ISO today. Now, as we talk about the microchips, in the next couple slides I'll go through that. For us, we offer 2 sizes, and that appears to be most people. Most of the chip manufacturers are doing that today. And everybody will tell you there's slight differences in our chips and how we manufacture them, how we produce them. There might be slight sizes and read performance, but I'll leave that up to you to decide which chips you want to go to. I have a standard 12 gauge, which is the larger that most folks have had exposure to, and then our newer 15 gauge smaller chip. But as I talk about, and I mentioned earlier, I heard some comments yesterday about RFID, and I want to make sure people understand. So these chips, these are low-frequency chips. Okay, so RFID is an umbrella of technology that goes from low-frequency, high-frequency, ultra-high frequency, and they each have a different application. For the low-frequency ones, it's really a short amount of data set and a short distance, or almost a contact read distance. And the applications for that, before we got into it 20 years ago in companion animal for lost found, you'd find it for passes, right? Anyone who works for a large company or works at a university where you have a secured lab, you have that picture ID and you touch the scanner on the wall. That's a low-frequency RFID device. If anyone purchased a car probably in the early 90s, late 80s, you got this key fob that came with your new car, and you had to find some place on the dash or somewhere to scan it, and that would activate your starter motor. Now it's actually embedded in the keychain, and it's more of an active device. There's a battery in it, so you have a bigger range. But that's really, from an industry standpoint, that's where that low-frequency RFID is used. But I've heard mentioned folks like Walmart and other people who are doing complex supply chain and inventory management, and even some comparisons to runners. They're using ultra-high frequency RFID tags, and those allow you to read massive amount of chips all at once. And that, again, that has its own application. For us, for an animal who, if I'm intaking it and I don't know who it is, if I had an ultra-high frequency, I'd read everybody that was in the shelter. And then on my scanner, I'd have no idea which one of these animals it was. So that's why originally when we chose low frequency, we needed that tighter control of distance, so I know that when I scanned, it was exactly that animal, and I wasn't accidentally reading somebody who was, 2 feet away. So that was more of a safety feature for us to do that. So if we're thinking about doing some of the other things that you see for ultra high frequency RFID, you may want to just reconsider that from the technology that we're actually deploying here in the small animal side. So with that, and again, you'll find from the applicator, each of the manufacturers has different ones as well. And again, for us, it's a single piece. They're all preloaded with microchips. For us, they have a visual collar tag, and what we find, and I know it's definitely different for a horse, right? You're not going to have a visual collar tag, but that's another line of defense that we have in trying to get animals home. If I think about the calls that come into our call center, it's probably about 40% I can do those recoveries outside of that permanent identification that I have in my database, just through those visual tags. So that helps keep a lot of animals out of harm's way and potentially in the shelter environment. So that's been a great piece for us as well. So again, to talk to the applicators, I've got a 15 gauge and a standard 12 gauge. And again, I'm not trying to really do a product pitch, I'm trying to roll through some of the stuff we have. Universal scanners are very important. And again, when I joined the organization about 10 years ago, we were still, as an industry, we were still battling with competing frequencies on microchips, scanners that maybe not read everybody's microchips. So there's a big push that we did and some of our other competitors as well to really standardize on a microchip, or at least make the ISO chips available 10 years ago. And now today when I look at it, the majority of us are there where we have universal scanners are available. A lot of us have done a lot of donations where we made sure shelter organizations had. If it was possible, older units were reprogrammed to make sure that they could read the microchips. So today we've got a decent infrastructure out there where they should be able to read all chips that are had been produced in the U.S. for identification. And again, the scanning process, real simple. Scanner, the unit itself, and they all pretty much operate, again, at a high level pretty much the same way. You press the button, it sends out RF energy. That energy activates the transponder. Transponder doesn't have a battery, so that energy is what powers up the microchip. And once it's powered up, it's got a real simple instruction set on that microchip where all it has to do is just transmit the code that was one-time programmable back at the factory, and that's all it does. And the stronger that signal, the further the range that it can produce. So again, we have some scanners out there that really produce a strong, and other ones just from a cost consideration might be a little less, so you'd be a little bit more active in your scanning techniques. Some of the subtleties, and even on the equine, depending on where the implant, depending on what country the animal originated from, it could be, in this case, this example that I have here, this is for animals that are implanted in the U.S. Typically it's between the shoulder blades for companion animals. And what we recommend is this pattern where we are perpendicular to it. And what may not be known is that the microchips, at least in certain scanner designs, and some of the newer ones have changed this, they're unidirectional, meaning the orientation of that microchip depends on how strong of a signal it's going to send. Some of the newer scanners have actually two antennas in it, so it's sending a perpendicular signal out. So you don't really have to do this, but we still recommend it as good practice because you never know if a microchip is accidentally moved. Sometimes when the animals are implanted, they may have the animal on the side, so they think it's between the shoulder blades, but then when it goes right side up, you find out maybe they implanted it a little off center. So we do that just to make absolute sure that that microchip is not somewhere else in the animal. And then again, you never know. The animal may have come from Europe, where they'll do it inside of the neck. So we encourage that as well, right? That's all good practice to really completely scan that animal. And I think in your space, that's something that needs to be addressed as well, right? So you have to target all the areas where it would be known to be, and it's a good practice to go even beyond that, just in the off chance that it's moved or was erroneously implanted. And so for HomeAgain, and even for some of our competitors as well, and I heard it here today, traceability, this whole concept of traceability. If I don't have a registration, how do I trace back? And for us, the way we've done that is I sell directly to my customers. So in my contact center, when we're managing a lost and found recovery case, we have different feeds that come into our CRM system. And one of them comes from our order management system that we have at Merck. And that will pull all shipment records for that microchip. So I'll know exactly who I sold it to. So if I don't have any scanned images, if I don't have any electronic data in my database, I can default to at least who I sold it to. And then from there I can call them and say, okay, so now in your systems, who did you implant? And for the most part, they'll have that information, and we're able to bridge that. So that, again, that's another layer of security that we've put in place just to make sure we get around the no contact information in the database. Let me just move on a little more here. So, so beyond and part of the system I keep talking about, again, it's more than just the chip, and it's more than just the database or the scanner that you have, but it's really how you market it, it's how you educate, and it's how you work with the professional organizations in your community. So we spent a lot of time with AHA creating educational videos on correct techniques for implantation, correct techniques for scanning your animals, and then the strong emphasis that you have to enroll that pet in the database. And then part of that problem 10 years ago that I mentioned, when we think about, we had competing frequencies of microchips, and you had a lot of the service providers, I'll say almost adversarial. Today it's a different environment. I can go down the hall and I can talk to my competitors and feel good about that. So we've recognized as an industry what we need to do, and this lookup tool kind of solves some of the problems that we were hearing from the professionals. And what it allows us to do is it preserves the privacy of the data that we have in our database. But what it does is it allows a shelter organization, for example, to have intaked a dog, and it has a microchip number. Now, it could be a Destron microchip, but it doesn't mean it's in my HomeAgain database. I mean, it could be in Datamar's database, it could be in AKC's, it could be in Microchip ID Systems database. So what we do is, this tool, it goes out and it pings those databases, and it looks to see in those databases if that chip resides in there. And then it looks at a date stamp on the information in that database. So what it'll do then is return and say, okay, this microchip is found in this database, and this database, and this database, and here's the last time that data was updated. So from a shelter organization, they can grab and say, okay, so it was last updated here, I'm going to call this database. And that allows them now to pull out the right information on who's the owner of that animal. So that's greatly improved some of the credibility for us in that marketplace. And really help drive the amount of time it takes to return that pet to owner, which in a shelter, that is critical. The longer that animal stays within your organization, the more that you have to spend dollars that you don't have. So anything we can do to reduce the time to return it back to the owner is greatly appreciated. So this is one of these tools that helps that. And again, for HomeAgain, and again, this is really just kind of specific to us. There's a level of active engagement with the consumers that you find that when you do that, when you're active, when you market to them and you talk to them and you encourage them to keep their online profile, they'll remind you when they move, or they change emails, or they change phone numbers. And to do that, so HomeAgain has a subscription model as well as some other value-added services, and there's some other folks that do it as well. They'll have different services, but this is just trying to keep those consumers engaged with us, so that God forbid they ever need our services, we're confident that we have the latest and greatest information available on them. Now, I mentioned the lost pet. Our pet rescuers that we have. Again, these are just totally volunteer. They've just given us their email address, and with that we told them, we will send you an email to let you know that if in your profile you say you want lost pet notices 5 miles, 10 miles, 15 miles from where you live, we'll send them to you. And it pops up on your phone, and all we do is ask you to be vigilant and be aware. If you see that dog that just ran through your backyard, you can give us a call, let us know that there was a reported sighting. So we help manage that as well for our customers, to let them know that, hey, there's been a reported sighting, and that ultimately helps them track down where we can find that animal. Sometimes people find it and call us as well, or it does wind up in a shelter. But sometimes this lets us be a little bit more proactive and find that, and it helps the owner find the pet on their own. And again, that goes out as an email. Breaks my heart as an engineer. We still do faxes. There's organizations that's how they still work, so that's fine. We'll send you faxes on our website as well, and we also have an app where we send that information as well. Again, these are just images of what you'll see. And it's neat on a map because you can actually see pinpoints of the loss, so you can see how active your area is. And we kind of joke in the home office, of course, all your lost animals are where the people are, right? So you're never going to find them where there's no people. We also put in, when we get found information as well, we'll populate that. I mean, it's one of those, when you tell people they're lost, the next question is, did you find it? So that's always been a struggle, because even for owners, when they found it, we mark it out to them and say, hey, is the pet home? Can you tell us? And some are good about it, and they'll tell us. And sometimes we don't know, but it's one of these ongoing things. But it's a feel-good when we know that they're back. And again, here's our app where you can find it as well, right? So again, beyond just a database, right, there's other things that you need to do to bring awareness to the program that you have, to make sure that your customers are engaged. Because if you build that database and nobody knows how to get at it, they can't make updates to it, it's not really a good database. So you really got to make sure you're talking to your customers to get that information in there. So one of the areas, and I'll talk about what this benefit is to the clinic, and it's really keying on one of the problems that we had and we recognized early on, and it was getting the enrollment information. When I started about 10 years ago, we were lucky if we got 50% compliance on registrations coming in, and primarily we were looking for it to come in through mail. And we know mail, notoriously not always the best, right? There's human error on whether, did I put it in the envelope, did I mail it? Or did the mail lose it? Or is other troubles that may happen. I mean, we've had from time to time a clinic calls up and say, hey, we had this staff member we just let go and we're cleaning up and we found this whole box of enrollments. Can you help us get this into the database, right? So clearly it's a broken process. So what we do for our vet clinics, we have this replenishment program. And the way that works is we're trying to encourage the enrollment. So what I tell them is, I don't want you paying for microchips. I just want you paying for registration, right? So I don't want you to pay for inventory that you put on your shelf. What I want you to do is, once you take these microchips that I'll give you for free, once you implant them and you collect your payment from the customer, send that information on to me and I'll bill you monthly. And every time I do that, then I'll send you more chips. Because what I want is, I need the consumer information, because that's the only thing that makes the program work. And I put that out there because you may want to think about that in your organizations on how you charge for what you're trying to do, right? If you want to try to incent the right behaviors, think about the ways you're charging. And I'll just leave you at that, right? I mean, each one of my competitors kind of does it differently. This is a program I find that works well for me. But just think about that. And one of the other areas, too, and I go into this slide and others, so that data and how I get it to come across. So we've also created a HomeAgain portal for our professionals. So they can go in and they can do the registration for their customers as well. So that's a way, right? That way they don't have to use paper. One of the ways I really prefer is we've worked really hard with different practice management systems, and in this case, Avamark's one of our biggest partners that we have. And what it does is the vet clinic is already putting all that customer information in their internal database to begin with. So what we're asking them to do is, hey, don't replicate the data and send it on to me. We'll just export it out and we'll send it right over to my database. That way it's seamless. They don't have to think about it. It just happens, right? And that's, again, just trying to make that process easy, right, so that it happens. And again, the invoicing programs, same thing I just described, right? Once I get those enrollments coming in, then I just invoice you on a monthly basis. So it's more of a pay-as-you-go type program, right? You're not tying up any working capital on inventory of microchips. And again, replenishment program, as I described, we send you free chips, you enroll, take payment, we bill you. Once I get enough where it's a box size, and for us it's a box size of 25, I just automatically ship it. Just automatically happens. Then we also offer online training on our professional site as well. Again, just reemphasizing the message about the hows to do it, the efficient ways to do it, and just really encouraging that, right? So we make that available to them as well, right? Having that conversation with their customer. And again, the importance of enrollment. And I mentioned this before. An enrollment without any kind of data in the database, it's like a cell phone without a carrier, right? You can push the buttons, but Your phone call is never going to get through. So you've got to really work on how do you get that enrollment and making sure that happens. And again, we partnered with Avamark to make that happen, a whole bunch of others. And even on the shelter side, we partnered with a shelter buddy who's basically a practice management system for the shelter side. Does the same thing. We work with Chameleon as well. Pulls that data right in. We also allow the online through our professional, and in some cases, we still allow our paper enrollments to come through. Try to minimize that, but it's still a fact of life. There's still folks out there that that from security purposes, they don't like to do anything online. But I find it strange that someone would take a paper enrollment, mail that, and still have their credit card information on it. But I'll let them do what they want. And then, of course, is just and I mentioned this earlier, right? It's the ongoing marketing that you've got to do the consumer base. As a consumer leaves either a shelter or a vet, they're going to get a whole bunch of paperwork on it. So we try to minimize that amount and make it most effective as possible. And now with all the electronic feeds that we get, there's the communication we'll send you, if you're a new customer, we'll send you that initial welcome letter, tell you, hey, thank you for joining the HomeAgain Pet Recovery Network. Here's the benefits that you get. Here's what we encourage you to do. Encourage you to go online, establish your profile, put in your pictures, put in anything, other details about your animal, and continue that relationship with us. We also send out newsletters, again, just reminding, staying front and center with them, reminding them that they have the program. Share with them stories. I mean, we have a lot of great stories. It's great stuff. And it really just emphasizes what we do. I mean, we save pets' lives, and that's our mission, and we feel real strong about that.